Okay, welcome back to Gary's Economics. Today we're going to predict the next election and we are going to answer the question, will Reform win? Okay, so whenever I want to make a prediction about politics, the first thing I always do is I check the odds. The betting odds are not always right, but I think it's always a good idea to look at what the market thinks and then compare it to what you think and see if you can understand what the difference might be. So I look at these odds a lot. Obviously, I used to be a trader. I'm looking at the markets a lot, but I also do, now I'm interested in politics, look at the betting markets for politics a lot. So we're going to flash these up here. I go to Betfair and I look at the market. It's a little bit difficult to translate, so I'll do it for you. This here shows the betting market for who will get the most seats at the next UK election. These two red and blue numbers, they show a range of probabilities, and if you divide one by the number, you get the probability. I'll do the maths for you. What this says is that Reform have almost exactly 50% chance of getting the most seats at the next election. And Labour have, that's probably going to be something like about 32% chance of getting the most seats. And then you've got the Conservatives down at, that's going to be about 12%. And then there's about a 2% chance for the Lib Dems and a little bit for a few other parties. So basically, the betting market thinks that Reform have almost exactly 50% chance of getting the most seats at the next election. And that probability has been steadily climbing really over the past few months. I've been following it. Does that mean Reform will win the next election? Now, this is a little bit more complicated because in the UK, we now have a multi-party system, which is kind of amazing. We've never really had one before. Because the main two historic parties, Labour and Conservatives, are very unpopular now, we're going to get a situation in the next election where really a lot of parties get a lot of seats. Most seats will go to Reform and Labour, but the Conservatives will probably still get a few. The Liberal Democrats will get a big chunk like they did last election. And I think the Greens will also get a decent chunk for the first time ever. And I think because Labour will be unpopular, the SNP, the Scottish National Party in Scotland, will get a lot of seats as well. Now, the betting market thinks, we can also ask the betting market whether it thinks anyone will get an overall majority. So the way it works in this country is they'll get a number of seats. Historically, the winning party almost always gets a majority, which means more than 50% of the seats. But because in the next election the vote will be so divided, there's a good chance that whoever wins, be it Reform or Labour, who it will almost certainly be one of those two parties, neither one will get an overall majority. So we can also look at the betting market here for overall majority. And what you see is that the chance of there being a majority is, they reckon there's about a 52% chance that we'll have what we call a hung parliament, which means no one has a majority. So there's a good chance, according to the betting market, Reform will get the most seats, but they will not get enough seats to get a majority, which then means there's the possibility for like coalitions, and you could end up with this really complicated situation where Reform have more seats, but you would imagine, because Reform are quite unpopular, other than with Reform voters, that the Liberal Democrats, the Greens and the Scottish National Party might support Labour, which might give them more seats than Reform. But then the Conservatives, will they support Reform? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. So you could end up in this really complicated like split situation where Reform have the most seats, but as a coalition, Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Greens have more, and then what will the Conservatives do? And it could be phenomenally complicated really. So basically, when we look at the betting market, what the betting market tells us is it's 50-50 Reform will get the most seats, but we don't know whether that will be enough for them to get a majority or to form a government. Okay, but that is the betting market. And obviously, as you know, because I talk about it a lot, I was a former trader and I was a very successful trader and I still do trade now. When I look at the odds for anything, financial market, betting market, I'm always asking myself, what do I know that the betting market doesn't know? Could the betting market be wrong? And I've got a pretty good track record recently of correctly predicting politics based really on just one thing which I know, which political forecasters generally don't know, which is that the economy and the economic situation and living standards are going to keep getting worse. This is based on the very simple understanding, which I speak about a lot on this channel, which is that falling living standards are linked to rapidly growing wealth inequality. Our political leaders are not doing anything about growing wealth inequality, which means that inequality will continue to grow and living standards will continue to fall. Understanding that is basically why I was able to predict the failure of Rishi Sunak, the failure of Keir Starmer, and the rising popularity of reform. That will keep happening. Living standards will keep falling, which means that by the time we get to the next election, and the next election here in this country is not due until 2029, by the time we get to the next election, living standards will be even worse than they are now. The economic situation will be worse, and this will be basically devastating for the popularity of Labour. And this is why I think you've seen reforms odds rising and rising and rising. That is basically because the longer Labour are in power, whilst they do nothing about inequality, it is basically inevitable that living standards will fall, their popularity will fall, and that will increase reforms leads in polling, and that will increase reforms likely to win the next election. So I think because the economic worsening is not baked into these statistics, I think reform's chances of winning the next election are significantly higher than the betting market thinks of 50%. One other thing I should add to that is if we look historically, this economic worsening is going to make Labour more unpopular. But there is a really strong historical trend of, at times of economic weakness, especially prolonged economic weakness, really strong demand from the public for the far right, and also for leaders who give a sense of strength, strong seeming leaders, especially leaders who are sort of strong and on our side. And that is very much the vibe that Farage is going for. And at the moment, none of the other main parties, Conservatives or Labour, have really been able to do that. So as the economy weakens, really further economic weakness is terrible for Labour, and it's just great for reform. So I think they have much better chance than the betting market suggests. So as that happens, as time passes, reforms, unless reform do something crazy or there's some massive scandal, which is definitely possible because I think there are some perhaps slightly rogue guys in their party. If that doesn't happen, I think reforms odds will go up and up and up and up and up. And then that will force the other parties to react, because as time passes, it will become more and more obvious that Labour are going to lose. The Conservatives are already in a very weak place. And as it becomes clear they're losing, they will have to move. So what will they do? So Labour are in an interesting situation. They have a budget coming up in November. Their economic situation is terrible. They're probably going to significantly raise taxes in the autumn. They're not going to go for popular taxes like the wealth tax, like taxes we support. They're probably going to go on taxes on the middle class. They might go on taxes on working people. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to do that and not take a big hit in popularity. Then in May, we will have local elections, including here in London, and I think they will do really, really badly. So I think that Labour firstly, they're already polling really badly. Keir Starmer, the leader, polls really badly. And they're about to go into two really bad events, basically. A really bad autumn budget in November and a really bad election in May. So basically, Labour are in a really bad situation, which is about to worsen. And what that means is the same thing that I've said for a long time, because I've always predicted this would happen to Labour. Keir Starmer's popularity would collapse, Labour's popularity would collapse, and Labour will be forced into a massive rebrand, which is going to change the leadership. And we can actually look at this in the betting markets as well. So if we flash it up, you can look at the betting market. When will Keir Starmer leave? And if you look at it now, at this point, it thinks that Keir Starmer will be lucky if he survives next year. And I think that there is a good chance that Keir Starmer will go next year. We don't know for sure it'll be next year. The betting market here reckons the chances of him surviving to the next election are about something like 16%, which is obviously very, very low. So we can't say for certain, but I think I'm pretty confident. Keir Starmer will go, Keir Starmer will be replaced, and there'll be a new leader. Now this, and again, I've said it for even since before Labour came in that this is what would happen. This is a massive opportunity for us because there will be a new Labour leader, probably next year. We don't know exactly when. And when that leader comes in, he or she will have to come in with some kind of brand, some kind of message, some kind of story, right? They will have to say, I am Mr. or Mrs. X, I stand for Y, my plan for the future of this country is Z. And in particular, because the economy continues to worsen, they will have to have a very clear vision and a very clear picture on what they were going to do for the economy. And when they come in, they will have to look around at all the different ideas about how we should manage the economy, and they will have to pick one, and they say, this is going to be the brand which identifies me. This is the kind of economic leader I am. This is the kind of economic future I want for the country. And this is going to be a massive, massive opportunity for me, for us, for this channel, because I think personally, if you are a new Labour leader coming in now and you want to win the election, the best economic strategy for you to pick is wealth taxes, is inequality, because really the simple question is, what the else is there? I don't think you can go running on what Labour and what Keir Starmer have been running on up till now, which is just, we are really sensible, we're going to try and sensible our way out of this, we're going to try and grow our way out of this, because it's really clear that that is the existing status quo. That's what governments have tried to do for 20 years. It hasn't worked. It's not working. It's not working for Keir Starmer. So they have to do something new. We have to basically position ourselves that when the new Labour leader comes in, they look around the world of economic ideas and they say the one that is going to win us the next election is inequality, is wealth taxes, is that stuff supported by Gary's Economics and Gabriel Zuckman and patriot millionaires. We have to be that voice. It's a massive opportunity for us. If they choose that, I think they can win the next election, which means I think Reform will lose the next election. Will they choose it? So I think it's an obvious choice. I think it's an obvious choice if they want to win. I don't think Labour are great, so they might not make the right choice. There's a couple of other choices they can make. The other choice is to kind of double down on this Mr. Sensible, Keir Starmer, sensible Labour stuff. Grow. It sounds great. If you're a very boring person, I don't think it's going to win the public. It hasn't worked for Keir Starmer. It didn't work for Biden and Kamala. It would be very unoriginal. It would be very uninspiring. I think you're handing the battle over to the right. There is another choice they can make, which I think is a good chance the choice that they will make, which is to come in very anti-immigration. And that is because at the moment, the big salience is on immigration. They're worried about reform. And they could say, okay, well, we are going to go on the issue which everybody is talking about, which is immigration. If they do this, it brings up the issues that I spoke about in the video from 2 weeks ago about storytelling and salience and wedge issues, which is immigration is the issue upon which Labour is weak and Reform is strong. So if Labour chooses to make immigration its defining economic policy, is basically signing its own death warrant, because it basically guarantees that the entire economic debate between the new leadership coming in and the election will constantly be the issue about which Labour is weak and Reform are strong. So basically, I think when the new Labour leader comes in, he's going to have three choices. Either try and shift salience towards inequality, distribution, which is the issue on which Labour is strong. Well, it could try to become strong. We are strong, and if they try to use our voice, they could become strong and Reform is weak. Or it can continue on its sort of nothing boring path, which I think is a death warrant. Or it can choose to aggressively raise the salience upon which its opponent is strong, which I think is a failure as well. If they come to us, I think they can win. I hope they will. I'm going to try everything to make sure that they do. That's going to be our main priority here on this channel. Unfortunately, I think they probably won't, which means I think they'll probably end up choosing the immigration option, which means Reform will win the next election. Okay, so next is the Conservatives. So the Conservatives are still in there with a chance. The betting market does think they have a 12% chance of winning the next election, getting the most seats, which is interesting, right? Because it's not zero. And at the moment, like, there's a lot of talk, Conservatives are dead. Their leader is also unpopular despite the Prime Minister's unpopularity. They're basically having their space aggressively usurped by Reform. And it looks like the party basically is at risk of disappearing. So why have they got their 12%? Okay, Reform, Conservatives also, again, we can look in the betting market and we can see Betting market thinks the Conservatives will almost certainly change their leader as well next year. So we can see here that the Kemi Badenoch also less than 50% chance of surviving next year. They'll bring a new leader in. It looks like it will be probably Robert Jenrick. We're not sure. There's this interesting thing that happens in games, which is when you are losing a game, especially when you are losing a game quite aggressively, being kind of crazy becomes an optimal strategy. And the reason for that is probably best understood by looking at it from the flip perspective, which is imagine I'm comfortably winning a game. I know as long as nothing crazy happens, the game will be predictable and I will win. So people who are winning want predictability, which means what people who are losing want is unpredictability. And I think as we get closer and closer to that election, at the moment the Conservatives are kind of biding their time, thinking about the new leader, hoping that Reform do something crazy, f it up somehow, get like a big scandal, and then Robert Jenrick is going to come in, basically, again, very hard on immigration, and hope that they can take the place that Reform lose by sort of f it up. If Reform don't f it up, as we get closer to the election, the Conservatives will be more and more in a situation where they have to do something crazy, and really, I'm kind of interested to see what they do. You will probably see more and more and more kind of wild and erratic behaviour from the Conservatives as we approach the election, because they are kind of facing basically an existential threat. There's a good chance that they will disappear as a party. And that 12% is basically the 12% chance of will the Tories do something crazy which is somehow popular. I think it's unlikely, but we'll see. There's a couple of other parties that I should mention, right, which is the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. If I'm honest, I think the Liberal Democrat situation is relatively uninteresting. The Liberal Democrats are, I don't dislike the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats are an interesting party because they compete, not exclusively, but almost exclusively with the Conservatives. And that is because their voters are largely richer people who would otherwise vote for Conservatives. Because the Conservatives did so badly in the last election, the Liberal Democrats won like almost all of their seats that they compete with the Conservatives. I think they'll probably just do that again. The big space really at the moment is who fills the space that has been basically vacated by the enormous decrease in popularity of Labour. And that is where the Greens are quite interesting, which is the Greens now have this new leader, Zack Polanski, who is making like quite a conscious pitch, which is I'm going to fill that space vacated by Labour. Labour have been sort of moving slowly right as they sort of try and chase reform. Their popularity has collapsed. And then there's this space which comes up for like, well, we are going to be a party which is like broadly left. And I've constantly said, I think that there's really a space for a popular party which focuses the economy, focuses inequality, focuses wealth tax, and also aggressively focuses on social media where there's a lot of political power. And this new guy, Zack Polanski in the Greens, seems to be, it almost feels like he's just been watching this channel and he's like, yeah, that's a good policy, I'm going to do that. So it's, I think the Greens have the potential to take a huge amount of seats because of the massive unpopularity of Labour. They're like an obvious guys who can fill that gap. The new leader, Zack Polanski, talks about 30 to 40 seats, which would be enormous for the Greens, who have never had more than 4 seats, which is what they won last election. It's optimistic, but I think it's possible for the reason that I highlighted before, which is Labour's popularity is gonna tank. The risk to the Greens is basically the thing that we want, which is if the Greens manage to get popularity on this idea of basically wealth taxes and inequality, the new leader of Labour might try to usurp that space, in which case it would really smash the Greens. But I mean, if what you want is wealth taxes and inequality, then what you kind of really want is for the Greens to do this interesting thing where they push a policy with the hope that Labour adopt it, which would lead to the Greens losing. It's this really interesting situation the Greens are in, which is the best thing they can do for the country is kind of intentionally lose because they want to drag Labour back into a kind of sensible policy space. And this is, what I think is really interesting here is that the Greens are now in the kind of situation that Nigel Farage was in for like the last 20 years. So Nigel Farage, some people might not know, he's the leader of the Reform Party, and before Reform he was leader of a party called UKIP. And he only won his first seat in Parliament last year in 2024. But despite that, Nigel Farage is almost single-handedly the man responsible for Brexit. And what that means is because he has been doing basically exactly what I suggested the Greens need to do, which is he's constantly been forcing the Conservatives to come towards his direction without ever winning any seats, because he can keep saying, well, I'm going to win 4 million, 5 million votes, and you're going to lose the election unless you come across. And I think Farage shows what I would like sort of the Greens and Green supporters to realise, which is under our kind of stupid political system where every election is an election where only two parties can't win, as a smaller party, it is impossible for you to win, but it is possible for you to dominate the political narrative by influencing the main political parties. And this brings me to the next point I want to make, which is, I think the only way really that I can see Reform not winning this election is either Labour come across under their new leadership and they adopt inequality as their policy message, or the Greens are so successful that they bring Labour across. And the truth is, I don't think either of those things are likely to happen, which means that I basically think Reform are probably going to win the next election. But if you do want it to happen, because I know that a lot of my viewers will probably not want Reform to win the next election, if you do want that to happen, if you want Reform not to win the next election, what do you do? So I was speaking to my brother this week, and he doesn't like me mentioning him on the channel, so probably won't be happy. But he said something. He's an interesting guy, my brother. He said something interesting, which I was speaking to him about, do you think Reform will win the next election? And he agreed with me. He was like, probably yes. And I was like, do you think there's any way that Reform could be stopped? And he just said one line, which was, aggressive and relentless pursuit of unity and common ground. That's all that he said, which is the kind of thing that he says. And in a sense, that's what I've just said, which is basically, unless the Greens and Labour, the party of the left and the party of the centre, both move into this space of focus on the economy, focus on inequality, deal with taxation, then Reform will win the election. And at this point, I should probably also mention, there is obviously a third party. There's the new party, which doesn't have a name yet, which is led by Corbyn and Sultana, which they're behind wealth taxes as well, right? These guys have also popped up. The truth is, we are going into the next election, Reform will be strong favourites. And really, whether Reform win or not will be decided by whether these different groups of people, these different groups of voters are able to do, as my brother said, he's going to hate me from keeping on mentioning him, aggressive and relentless pursuit of unity and common ground. It's as simple as that, basically. We have, especially in this country, a political system which aggressively punishes division. Aggressively punishes division. What will probably happen in the next election is that Reform will win an overall majority with the smallest ever number of votes that any party has ever won an overall majority. And that will be simply because the people and the politicians in this country who do not support Reform are divided. We have a political system, first past the post, which, as an aside, I think is a stupid political system. Maybe I'll talk a video about it one time. That voting system, that political system, aggressively punishes division. So whether Reform win or not is basically a question of, will the centre and will the left be able to be aggressive and relentless in their pursuit of common ground? And I would love for them to unite on the issues which they have in common, which I would like to believe are fixing the economy, dealing with inequality, dealing with an unfair taxation system. In reality, I don't think these various groups are going to be able to do that. And unfortunately, that's just simply because there's a lot of bad blood and a lot of antipathy between the centre and the left, and that goes in both directions. If they are able to be sensible, get their heads together, focus on the message that will win, which is inequality, distribution, the economy, focus aggressively on their common ground, try to avoid bickering and raising the salience of their differences, try to avoid raising the salience of their opponents, then they can win. If they're divided, they will lose. Okay, so that's my prediction. I do think Reform will win the next election. I think that will be clearer as time goes on. Really, the big dice that is yet to roll is Labour's rebrand and Labour's new leadership, and in particular what they choose as their economic message. I've been talking to Labour. I'm not that popular. They're not that popular with me either. I don't think that much of them, but I say that like I want them to win because I think we have a much better chance of getting wealth taxes with them than with Reform. But I don't think they will. I think they will. I think they'll kind of up. I think they'll probably choose migration. I think they'll end up just boosting the salience of their opponents. And I think Reform and Farage will win the next election. So, what do we think about that? Now, this is quite difficult to talk about, right? Because I try really, really hard on this channel to be non-politically partisan. I am a single issue channel. I'm an economist. I think the issue is inequality and it's about wealth taxes. So how do we do that? And I try my best, and I genuinely want this channel to be watched by people on all sides of the political spectrum, including Reform voters. And the country is becoming so divided at the moment between people who like Farage and Reform and people who don't, that it's very difficult to send a message that will reach and be listened to all my viewers, because I know we're listened to by people who are on both sides of this. So I'm going to try to split my message up into basically two parts. One for people who don't want Reform to win, and then one for people who are maybe supporting Reform. Okay, so if you don't want Farage to win, and we're going to have to split this message up now between the people on the centre, people who might, if you want to know who's on the centre, it's, do you like Keir Starmer? Do you like the current Labour Party? Do you like Tony Blair? These kind of people who like that kind of status quo. What do we want to say to them? And then we're going to talk to people on the left, people who might like Zack, Polanski, might like Jeremy Corbyn. What are the risks to both these groups? Okay, if you're on the centre, and presumably you want Labour to win, the way that you will lose this next election is by either persisting with a status quo economic policy which has no salience, no cut through, no narrative, or by moving aggressively towards constantly talking about immigration and aggressively raising the salience of your opponents. You need a message which is different from Reform's message. If your message is Reform's message, Reform will win the next election. So that's it. You need your own message, you need your own voice, you need something that's popular, and I'm building it for you here. If you want to win the next election and you're on the centre, you don't need to change your opinions on everything, but you do need to be open to doing something on inequality, on wealth taxes, on the economy. You want to be saying we're going to raise tax on the super rich so that we can cut tax on workers. That will boost your economy. That will make you popular. That is how you win. That is how you win. And I want you to be really, really mindful of that when you're thinking about who is the next Labour leader and what she support. Now, if you're on the left, I think the real risk to the left at this point is with the real growth, the aggressive growth in the popularity of Farage and Reform and things like the march, which happened last weekend. I think there is a risk that the left gets very, very angry and starts to be really, really aggressive and accusatory towards people who might be voting for Reform. I want to show you a clip which I saw on Politics Joe the other weekend. So let's run it. This is Politics Joe talking to some Reform, passionate supporters, people who've gone to the conference. Let's see what they're saying.
Wealth tax or no wealth tax?
It's a very hard one. I mean, I come from a working class town. Everything in kind of Reform's policies would maybe leaning more towards no wealth tax.
So for me, if the wealth tax was possible, I'm at a stage in my politics where I would actually support it.
There are a lot of Reform voters who'd be supportive of wealth taxes. I know that a lot of people are scared of the growth of Reform, and the truth is I am scared of the growth of Reform as well. I know that a lot of people who watch this channel, who see themselves as from the left, are probably people who are very interested in politics, people who are very knowledgeable about politics. Just the very fact that you're here watching this video means you are probably somebody who is interested in and knowledgeable about politics. I would like you to understand that the vast majority of people in this country are not experts in politics. They read very little about politics. They have not spent loads and loads of time thinking and researching politics. And they get their information from the media or from social media. And what they have been told and are being told consistently in the media is that the reason you are poor, the reason your kids can't get a house, the reason you can't get a job is because of immigration or because of illegal immigration, because of refugees. That's what they're being told. they're being told that again and again and again and again and again. So this is where they are. This is what they think. This is what they're being told. They think that the reason they're being poor is because of immigration. And if they go to a protest or, you know, they speak online about this and somebody gets in their face and calls them a racist, that's not going to win them over. You are not going to win these people over like that. Like, I totally understand the instinct of people on the left to worry about increasing racism in society. I think it's happening. I can feel it happening. You need to be pragmatic. You need to be sensible. If you want to get progressive change in the next election, you need to win people over. And I think you need to be really careful to resist the temptation to go around shouting at people, calling them racists. Listen, there are racists in this country. There always have been racists in this country. There's always been 100,000, 200,000 people who vote for the BNP and might have been motivated by racism. Reform are going to win the next election, and you are not going to stop that by turning around and calling people racists. You need to do, and I know this might not be pleasant for some of you, I think my brother's right. You need to be relentless and aggressive in your pursuit of common ground and unity. And that means you're willing to go to people who you might not agree with everything about and say, listen, I know we don't agree on everything, but let's find the thing that we do agree on. And let's fight for that. Because those people at those protests, they, just like you, are struggling to pay the rent. Their kids are struggling to pay the rent. They're struggling to find economic futures. If you centre that, if you focus on that, you can build something positive, you can win them over. If you focus on what divides you, all you're going to do is make this country more and more divided. So that's it, you know. I think really, in politics, as in history, division loses. I think you can afford to find your differences and fight over them when you are winning. If you are losing, you need to find unity. And it's as simple as that, basically. If people on the left and on the centre are able to be aggressive and relentless in their pursuit of common ground, they can win. And I think that common ground is the economy. I think it's inequality. I don't see any other way of stopping reform. So if that's what you want to do, if you want to stop reform, if you want to see a more equal country, you need to focus on that in your arguments. Find that common ground. Focus on your common ground and unity when you speak to other people. So I'm going to have a word for people who want reform to win. But before that, I just want to talk a little bit about what happens if reform do win. And I know we have viewers all over the country. It's not just reform here, because the far right are winning and are about to win all over the world. You know, my big concern, if reform win, is not actually really Farage and reform. It's not the current far right. I know these guys get called fascists and they get called racists. I don't think they are all fascists and racists. My big concern is that when reform get into power, the same thing will happen to reform as what happened to Labour, what happened to Rishi Sunak, what has happened to Trump, what happened to Biden, what has happened to basically every politician and political party in the last 15 years. They come in, they don't deal with the fundamental economic problem, which is growing inequality. Living standards worsen, and they find themselves in the same situation Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer found themselves in, which is like, okay, we're failing on the economy, we're super unpopular, we need to roll the dice, we need to rebrand. What do we do? And you have this situation here where Labour are kind of stuck in the centre, and when you're in the centre, you don't really know where to go. I said this about Trump before he came in, and I think it's proving true, and I'll say the same about reform. Is when they come in, their economic policies aren't working. The obvious political move is to say, this is because we are not going far enough on immigration. I think it's just so, and you can say, look, it's because we're being blocked, Labour are blocking us, or the courts are blocking us, or the European Court of Human Rights are blocking us, or the academics are blocking us, or the lefties are blocking us, or the Guardian's blocking us. And you can say the reason that the economy is not working is because we are not being aggressive enough on immigration. So at the moment, the emphasis is on illegal immigration or asylum seekers. And okay, you leave the European Court of Human Rights, you know, the Convention on Refugees, and you say the UK doesn't accept any refugees. Done. That's not going to fix the economy. I guarantee you. I'll bet you any money that will not fix the economy. Then you say, okay, well, you know, the reason for that is because, you know, that was just one part of migration. You know, look at all the enormous amounts of legal migration. And legal migration is much, much, much bigger than asylum seeking. It's okay. We need to get rid of legal migration. And if you do that, that's not going to fix the economic problem. So you get rid of legal migration. You're still not fixing the economic problem. What do you do next? Well, the obvious place to go next is to say, well, that wasn't enough because we've already had too much migration. Right? So you go back and you look at people who have recently migrated in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years, and you say, okay, we need to get rid of recent migrants. You know, these people might be British citizens in many cases. They might have permanent residency. So you start to kick out recent migrants. What if that doesn't work? You know, my real concern is this can keep going further, and then you can start scapegoating more groups. You know, there was a clip online. Did you see that clip with the Fox News anchor saying he thinks we should kill homeless people? Let's get this one up. Okay. Yes, there was a clip on the right-wing American station recently, Fox News, where they're talking about how to deal with the problem of homelessness. This is not the future. This is today.
Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, Brian, why did it have to get to this point?
Right.
You know, I think that really happened, by the way. This is a really genuine thing that happened in the US, which is a Fox News host suggested that the way to deal with the problem of homelessness is to execute all the homeless people. So, and I'm not saying that Farage wants this, you know, and I'm not saying even that Trump wants this. But when your plan to deal with the economy is to scapegoat a group of people, and then you hit that group of people, you kick them out of the country and it doesn't work, and you're unpopular, the obvious thing to do next is to go harder. And you're seeing this now, you're seeing on the biggest news channel in the US, anchors suggesting the thing to do is to murder all the homeless people. Listen, I'm not saying Farage wants to do that, right? I'm an economist. I think Farage will win the next election. They will fail on the economy. The obvious political move will be to go further. And I am very, very worried about where this could go in the end. And I would like that, hopefully, to sharpen your mind, both if you want Farage to win and if you don't want Farage to win. But listen, if they win, I think we do need to be ready for this, because I think they probably will win. There will also be massive political opportunity, which is the sense that at the moment, Farage has the phenomenal strength of never having been in power, which means that he cannot be blamed for any of the economic weaknesses that the UK is in, because the Conservatives were in for 14 years, they failed, Labour have been in for a year, they are failing and will keep failing, and he has this ability to say, well, I have this magic bullet and it's going to work. When he comes in, just as Trump has just come in, living standards will keep falling, and we need to be ready to say what I've always said, which is this is what will happen if you don't deal with inequality. Until and unless we have a powerful and cohesive narrative, a powerful story, which I think should be about inequality and about billionaires, the only political space, because the centre is obviously failing, will be to go further and further right. Okay, now I want to go on to the people who want reform to win. I went on LBC yesterday, on Tom Swarbrick's show. I did a live phone in, and somebody called in and he said that he's a fan of the channel, so he might be out there watching today, and he says he enjoys the videos and he enjoys the stuff that we put out. But he said to me, you're not going to win, because what I care about is immigration, and there's millions of us in this country that what we care about is immigration. And maybe not you, talking to me, maybe not you, Gary, you don't maybe do this, but your supporters, they turn around to us and they call us bigots and they call us racists. And I'm not a racist, I'm just worried about immigration. I want there to be less immigration. This is what this guy said to me. And I just want to make it very, very clear, because I know probably if you are a reform voter, you might be hearing things online about me, that I'm a radical leftist or whatever. There is a space for you here. I do this for you, not just only for you, but I do this for all of the hard-working men and women in this country and across the world who see their living standards falling, okay? I know it's broken. I know it's not working. And I know when you look at the politicians around you, you see a lot of people who think are pretty shit, and if I'm honest, I think the same thing as you. I understand that. And that's exactly why I do what I do. I walked away from a lot of money to do this because I could see the way the country was going. I know that there's not a lot of great political leaders out there. I don't trust the guys that are leading you. They are very, very wealthy people. They're funded by very, very wealthy people. Their plan is to cut the taxes of very, very wealthy people and to fund that by cutting your public services, your education, the NHS, the things that you need. That's not going to work out well for you and your kids. There's a space for you here. I don't take sides. I'm an economist. I do what I do for the future of this country, for the future of ordinary people like you, families like yours, your kids, your grandkids. I'm a very good economist. I've got a very good track record. I've got a lot of educational videos which I put up here for free, which you can watch for free to understand what's happening. If you do not deal with growing inequality, the living standards of your kids and your grandkids will get worse and worse and worse and worse. There's a space for you here. And I know when I say that I don't trust your leaders, you're going to turn around and you're going to point to Keir Starmer and you're going to say, well, I don't trust him either. And the truth is, I agree with you. I wish we had more good political leaders. And at the moment, maybe we don't. I'm working hard to build that. And I would like your support. We're building something here that's going to put more money in your pocket. That's going to mean your kids can have homes. But there's something else I need to say as well. Listen, I'm from London and I grew up in a very multicultural place with lots of people, lots of different colours, lots of different countries. And last weekend, I had friends who were scared to leave the house, were scared to walk on the streets in London. And that's because they think you're racists. That's what they think. And I tell those people that you're not all racists, that a lot of you are just worried about the future of this country. And they don't believe me. So I need you to prove me right. If it's about immigration and it's not about racism, keep saying that. And if you see racists in your movement, you need to do something about that. Because these economic problems that we're seeing in our country, of growing inequality, falling living standards, unaffordability of housing, I guarantee you right now, they are affecting people on both sides. And I guarantee you right now, if you guys are not able to aggressively find your common ground and unity, that division will tear this country apart and will destroy the living standards for your futures, your kids and your grandkids. So listen, that's my final message. I don't like doing this school teacher shit. I don't know if it's going to work, but if you're divided, you will lose. And I'm not saying that just to the right. I'm not saying that just to the left. I'm saying that to everyone. If you are divided, you will lose. Every single year, the richer get richer. Every single year, the rich get richer and richer and richer and richer. And ordinary people lose their homes. And ordinary families can't afford to have kids, you know, can't afford to turn the heating on. That is what happens. If you're divided, you will lose. If you are divided, you will lose. You will spend your time fighting each other and the rich will take everything. You're going to need each other. Don't forget that. Tax wealth, not work. Thank you very much.